You know, for all the things Titus did wrong with this game, they did do one thing right. They based the game on the cartoon that was running at the time, The New Superman Adventures. And if you look at the back of the box for the game, you'll see that's actually the name of the game too. Rolls it right off the tongue, doesn't it? This was a good idea because people buying the game didn't need to know anything about the comics. Like, they didn't need to know that Superboy Prime punched a hole through time. And instead, all they needed to do was watch the cartoon, and you were caught up to speed. They started working on the game in 1996, a few months after the show started. And the game was first shown off at E3 1997. That's right, Superman 64 was shown off at an E3. That's a scary thought. The game took over 2 years to make, and by the time it came out in 1999, there was only 3 more brand new episodes of the cartoon made. What happened? Did Superman 64 kill the cartoon? No one really knows for sure besides those involved, but odds are that wasn't the case. Considering the Batman cartoon ended at the beginning of the year, and there had barely been any new episodes of the Superman cartoon that year already, odds are Superman 64 was just rushed out the door so they could actually capitalize on the fan base of the show while it still existed. And, well, you know how all that worked out. Founded in 1985 by brothers Hervé and Eric Kane, and taking their name from Eric's childhood nickname, Titus has created and published numerous games for systems varying from the Amiga all the way up to the GameCube. Now, some of you may be wondering if they've actually made any good games, and surprisingly enough, yes they have. In fact, they made this one game that I loved playing as a kid, but I had no idea they made it up until I started working on this LP. Lamborghini American Challenge. The game was amazing. Except for that one time. That one time I lost a race so badly the game freaked out and then suddenly started playing the ending credits. Over the years, Titus has been in charge of porting games to different consoles with varying degrees of success. The few games they've made in-house range from good to, well, Superman. The last game they made before going bankrupt in 2005 was RoboCop for the Xbox, which some people say is actually a worse game than Superman 64. That's kind of impressive. So where are the Kane brothers now? They're still around, and they're still running a company. You might have heard of it. It's called Interplay. You know, that company that published Fallout, Earthworm Jim, and all those other great games. They're currently working on the Fallout MMO, along with some ports of classic games like MDK2 to WiiWare. Look, I know that Titus made a couple of bad games, but I don't think they deserve the unbridled hatred they get all the time. I mean, it's not like they made a second Superman game, right? Eric Kahn is an interesting person. At 44 years old, he's worked on over 100 different games and co-founded his first company, Titus Interactive, at the age of 19 with his brother. Currently, Eric is the president of Interplay, heading up projects such as Interplay Discovery, which allows for game developers looking for publishers the chance to get their games released to the public. In the credits of Superman 64, Eric is listed as the producer, which means he was heavily involved in the development of the game. Eric was kind enough to perform an interview over email with me and answer a number of questions about Titus, Interplay, and of course, Superman 64. He details some interesting things about his time in the gaming industry, like about acquiring licenses and working with a sibling, along with comments on challenges studios have to go to survive in a cutthroat industry. He even mentions some new games to expect from Interplay in the future. Then we get to discussing about Superman, and here's where things get really interesting. While Eric does admit that the original design for Superman 64 was perhaps a bit too ambitious for what the system could handle, he also mentioned something that I don't think anyone else is aware of. The owners of the Superman license, DC Comics and Warner Brothers for the cartoon, caused immense problems for the game design. Apparently the decision for Superman to have limited use of his powers and go into a virtual world were all decided by Warner Brothers, because they didn't want to see Superman beating up real people. They also caused the game to be delayed 6 months due to what Eric describes as political reasons. When asked whether or not the final product reflected their original vision, Eric mentioned that it didn't even meet 10% of their expectations. Curiously though, when I asked him what got removed from the game, he wasn't able to do so, potentially meaning a non-disclosure agreement is still in place on the game. The rest of the interview contains comments about the cancelled PlayStation version of the game, their original intentions to do work on a Spider-Man game, and Eric's opinion on the legacy of Superman 64. If you would like to read the full interview for yourself, you can find a link for it in the video description. Around the turn of the millennium, Titus acquired a number of studios so they could expand their company and develop more games. One of the studios they acquired was Blue Sky Software. While they were founded in 1988 and started by making games for the Atari 7800, including the AAA title Ninja Golf, gamers will mainly recognize Blue Sky for their Sega Genesis games such as Shadowrun, Jurassic Park, the Vectorman games, and the World Series baseball franchise, which we now know as the MLB 2K franchise. Blue Sky was originally working on porting Superman 64 to the PlayStation 1, but after the, less than flattering reviews of the game, they began working on an original Superman game for the system. One that had full motion cutscenes, let you use all of Superman's powers right away, and most importantly, didn't have you flying through oversized hula hoops. The game seemed to focus much more on exploration and puzzle solving rather than simply killing enemies to move on, and it looked much better than the N64 version. Superman stayed in buildings and mazes instead of flying around a barren metropolis, and a bunch of items from the show made appearances such as Superman's spacesuit and scuba gear, along with villains such as Mxyzptlk. Unfortunately, Titus lost the rights to the Superman license before development of the game finished. Due to the abysmal review scores of the N64 game, and the problems between Warner Brothers and Titus that Eric Hahn mentioned in the interview I had with him last episode, they were unable to strike a deal and the game was never released. Which is really a shame because the PS1 game actually looked decent. After 2 years of development, and being so close to completion that Sony gave the game a product code, the game was officially canned in the year 2000. This would mark the last time that Blue Sky Software would work on a home console game. The studio would close its doors a year later, in March 2001, due to the financial problems of parent studios Interplay and Titus. A strong 13-year legacy, ending with a whimper, at the hands of Superman and Titus Interactive.